Hello student. Today we are going to start chapter 8, How do organisms reproduce? So you all know that reproduction is the process by which living organisms produce more living organisms of its own kind. You can see the baby of a human being is like human being, baby of tiger is like tiger, the baby of cat is like similar to cat. So in this chapter, the contents of this chapter is reproduction, importance of reproduction, types of reproduction, asexual reproduction, and type sexual reproduction. So reproduction. Reproduction is the process by which living organisms produce new individuals of the same species. Reproduction is necessary for the survival and increase in the population of a species. If organisms do not reproduce, their population decreases and species will become extinct. Do organisms create carbon copy of themselves? Yes. The DNA, you all know that, deoxyribonucleic acid. The DNA molecules in the chromosomes in the nucleus is responsible for the transfer of characters from the parents to the offsprings. During reproduction, the reproductive cells produce two copies of the DNA which separate into two cells. The DNA copies will be similar but not identical to each other. So the new individual have slight variations from their parents. If you have seen the offspring having some variation, it is not totally 100% identical to their parents. So this is the basis for variation and evolution of the new species. So you can say that variation is the basic foundation, the basic requirement of the evolution of new species, that is the formation of new species. The importance of variation. Why variation is important? Because DNA copying during reproduction is important for maintaining the body designs of different organisms to survive in the existing environment. But the environment is constantly changing due to changes in temperature, climate, water levels, etc. If organisms cannot adjust themselves to the changes in the environment, then their species will become extinct. So definitely the organisms can survive only if they have some variation, then only they can adjust with the changing climate. If there are variation in some individual of a species, they may be able to survive the changes in the environment. So variation in species is necessary for the survival of different species and form the evolution of new species. So I hope you understand why variation is important. If there is no variation, so that means there is no evolution of new species. There is no formation of new species. Now, types of reproduction. So basically there are two main types of reproduction in living organism. They are asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is reproduction in which new individuals are produced from a single parent. And sexual reproduction is reproduction in which two individuals are involved to produce a new individual. Asexual reproduction is of different type. They are fission, budding, regeneration, fragmentation, spore formation, vegetative propagation, etc. Now there is the differences between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. First I explain about the asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction involves single organism, no production of gametes. There is no fusion of gamete. It requires only mitotic divisions. It produces offspring that are identical to the parent. In this chain, chance of genetic variation is only through random mutation, because there is no variation because of in asexual reproduction only one parent is involved, so there is the chances of variation is very low. Sometimes it's variation take place because of random mutation. Mutation means sudden sudden changes in genes. Asexual reproduction is not very useful for natural selection in evolution of species. It occurs by budding, fragmentation, spore formation, etc. Sexual reproduction involve one or two organisms. Male and female gametes are produced. It involves fusion of male and female gametes. It requires meiotic division followed by mitotic division. Meiotic division means reduction of chromosomes. Reduction of chromosomes. Now, offsprings will have some characters from male parent and other from female parents. Some characters may not be present in either male or female. In this reproduction, there is more chance for genetic variation. Sexual reproduction is highly useful for natural selection in evolution of species. It occurs due to pollination and fertilization. Now, fission. Fission is an asexual reproduction by which an unicellular organism divides and forms two or more new individuals. Fission is of two types. They are binary fission and multiple fission. Fission. Fission is an asexual reproduction by which a unicellular organism divides and forms two or more new individuals. Fission is of two types. They are binary fission and multiple fission. Binary fission. In this method, an organism divides and forms two individuals. First, the nucleus divides and forms two nuclei. Then the cytoplasm divides and forms two nuclei, daughter cells. Example, Amoeba, Paramaecium. Here in diagram it is clear. First, amoeba, the nucleus is elongated, and after that it's divided into two. After that, cytoplasm divided into two, and it's finally it is in two daughter nuclei. It's formed two daughter nuclei. Second is the multiple fission. It is in this method, one organism divides into many daughter cells. That means the nucleus repeatedly multiplied, and it forms so many daughter cells. For example, Plasmodium. Second type of asexual reproduction is budding. In this method, a bud-like projection is formed on the body of the organism. The bud then develops into a new individual. It then separates from the parents and forms an independent individual. For example, Hydra and yeast. You can see in the diagram the Hydra, one bud is formed in the body of Hydra, and after that it grows and it detached from the parent body, and it's grown in a separate new individual. Like that in yeast also, you can see the bud, the formation of bud is formed, and after that it grow and detach from the body. Next is regeneration. In this method, a part of the body, if the organism, if cut or broken, can develop into a new individual. For example, Hydra planaria starfish. In exam diagram, you can see here planaria is here, and the body of planaria is cut into three parts, and each part develop in a new individual. Each part of the planaria develop in the new individual. You can see from here one planaria is cut in three parts, and after that all three parts just become develop in a new individual planaria. There is the three planaria is here. So this is known as the regeneration. Next is fragmentation. Fragmentation. In this method, the body of a simple multicellular organism breaks up into smaller pieces on maturation, and each fragment develop into new individual. For example, Spirogyra, you can see in diagram also, it break down, and each part of the plant, each pieces are developed in new individual. Next is spore formation. This is the also type of asexual reproduction. In this method, structures called sporangia produce tiny cells called spores. When the spores come in contact with the moist surface, it develops into new individuals. For example, Rhizopus, Mucor, Penicillium, etc. Next is vegetative propagation. In this method, new plants are produced from the vegetative parts of the plants like root, stem or leaf. You know, the flower is the reproductive part of the plant, whereas the root, stem or leaf are known as the vegetative parts of the plant. So, example, from roots, dahlia, sweet potato; from stem, potato, ginger; from leaf, bryophyllum, begonia. Plants produced by vegetative propagation produce flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from seeds. It also helps in the propagation of plants which do not produce seeds like rose, jasmine, banana, etc. And the vegetative propagation can also be done artificially by cutting, layering and grafting. These are the artificial method of or way of the vegetative propagation: cutting, layering and grafting. This is the tissue culture. Tissue culture is the medium, artificial method to develop a plant. Actually, tissue culture means it is the method of cultivation of plant where a new plants are grown by removing tissue or separating cells from the growing tip of a plant. The cells are then placed in an artificial medium where they divide rapidly to form a small group of cells or callus. The callus is transferred to another medium containing hormones for growth and differentiation. The plants are then placed in the soil so that they can grow into mature plants. Using tissue culture, many plants can be grown from one parent in disease-free condition. This technique is commonly used for ornamental plants. Now, second type of reproduction is sexual reproduction. So first we will discuss about the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So this is the parts of the reproductive parts of the flower. You can see in the diagram. The stamen and pistil are the reproductive part of the flower. The stamen is the male reproductive part. It produces pollen grain in the anther which contains the male germs called male gametes, and pistil is the female reproductive part. It produces ovule in the ovary which contain the female germ cell or female gametes. You can see directly in the structure. This green part is the actually known as sepal. It's protect the buds. This prominent colorful part is the petal which attract the insect, and it's also cover the stamen. And stamen is the male reproductive part. Stamen itself have anther and filament. Filament is the stalk to hold the anther, and anther is the uppermost top part which contain dust like structure, that is the pollen grain. And here this is the female part, that is the known as the pistil. So pistil have three parts: stigma, style and ovary. The mouth of the pistil is known as the stigma, which receive pollen grains, and this style just after that is form a neck-like structure, that is a style, and at the end it is ovary which produce egg. So this is the reproductive part of the flower. So you can see here the flow chart, reproductive part of the flower, stamen is the male part and carpel or pistil is the female part. Stamen have two parts, filament and anther. Anther contain pollen grain, that is the male gametes. And carpel or pistil have three parts, divided in three parts, stigma, style and ovary. And ovary contain egg cells or female gamete. Now pollination. So what is pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. It takes place by wind, water or insects. If the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, it is self-pollination. And if it is transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower, it is cross-pollination. Pollination takes place by insects, winds, water, etc. You see in the diagram, this is the example of self-pollination because here the anther of the same flower is just reached in the stigma of the same flower. So pollination takes place in same flower. The male and female both gamete is from same flower. So this is self-pollination, and here you can see the insect is here. Through the insect, the cross-pollination take place here. The stigma, the pollen grain from one flower is transferred, pollen grain of one flower is transferred to another flower with the help of this insect, with the help of this insect, and this is known as the cross-pollination. Now fertilization. So after the pollen grain is transferred to the stigma, it produces a pollen tube. You can see here in the structure, when pollen grain just transfer in the stigma, it formed a pollen tube. This is the tube which passes through the style and enter the ovary and ovule. In the ovule, the male germs cell or male gametes fuse with the female germs called to form a zygote. This process is called fertilization. After fertilization, the zygotes divide several times and form the embryo, which then develops into the seeds, and the ovary develops into the fruit. External fertilization and internal fertilization. Fertilization are two types, the external fertilization and internal fertilization. The fusion of male gametes and female gametes occur outside the body is called external fertilization. Both individuals discharge their gametes outside the body. Development occurs outside the body. Example, frog. Internal fertilization, the fusion of gametes occur inside the body. Only the male discharges sperm into female genital tract. Development occurs inside the body. Example, human being, birds, cattle, etc. Now, reproduction in human being. First, I am going to describe male reproductive system. The male reproductive system consists of a pair of testes which produce the male reproductive cells called sperm and the hormones testosterone. It is contained in sac-like structure called scrotum. From each testis arises a tube called vas deferens. It joins into the urethra. The urethra is enclosed in a muscular organ called penis. It has an opening called genital pores. The seminal vesicles and prostate glands produce fluids which provide nutrition and help in the movement of the sperm. You can see here in the diagram, it is very clear. And this is the bladder. You see here, this is the seminal vesicle, this is the prostate gland. This is the testicle which produce, here two testes are there, which produce the sperm, and it activate with the action of the hormones testosterone the sperm is produced here, and after that, through this vas deferens, this is the pipe-like structure, this is the vas deferens. From here, this sperm move, and the seminal vesicles just provide the nutrients, and prostate gland and seminal vesicles provide the nutrients and make the medium liquid to make it more motile. So with the help of this seminal vesicles and prostate gland, the sperm get nutrition and the liquid substance to be mobile. The sperm is able to move from one place to another place, and after that it reach out from the come out from the through the penis. And here is the structure of the sperm. Sperm is having the long it have the head and tail. It have two main part, head and tail. Head is the short part and tail is the long part, and tail help to movement of the sperm. Now, female reproductive system. The female reproductive system consists of a pair of ovaries which produce the female reproductive cells called ova or eggs, and the hormones oestrogen. Above the ovaries are tubes called oviducts or fallopian tube. The two oviducts unite into a bag-like structure called uterus. The uterus has opening called vagina. You can see here the structure of the female reproductive system. Here, this is the two ovaries. This side two ovaries here, and this ovary actually release the egg it's a monthly once it's release the egg, and this egg through this fallopian tube, it will be if male male sperm, male gametes if enter in the female reproductive tract, it enter through the fallopian tube, and here in the fallopian tube the fertilization take place here, and after that it will transfer into uterus. So this is the uterus, and this is the fallopian tube, and this is ovary. This is the structure of egg. Now, fertilization in human being. How fertilization take place in human being? During sexual intercourse, the sperm from the male enters into the vagina of the female. The sperm reaches the oviducts. One sperm fuses with an egg and forms a zygote. The zygote then gets implanted in the uterus. The zygote then starts dividing to form an embryo. The embryo gets nutrition from the mother's blood through the placenta. The development of the child takes 9 months, and then the child is born. So this is the overall process of fertilization in human beings. So fertilization take place here in the fallopian tube. Once fertilization take place, zygote is formed. After some time, this zygote is transferred into uterus. This is the stages in the early development of the embryo. Here you can see this is the fertilization take place, and after that it zygote transfer into implanted into uterus. Here development take place. It the embryo take nutrition from the placenta, and when the growth is completed, it take up around 34 weeks, and after that it will take out and take birth from the birth canal. Vagina is known as the birth canal. Menstruation. The ovary produce an egg every month, and the uterus prepares to receive the fertilized egg. Its wall becomes thick and spongy with blood vessels for nourishing the embryo. If fertilization does not take place, then the uterus wall breaks and comes out of the vagina as blood and mucus. This cycle takes place once every month and is called menstruation. If suppose there is no fertilization, then menstruation take place. Now, last topic of this chapter is reproductive health. Sexually transmitted diseases are diseases transmitted through sexual contact. They may be bacterial infections like gonorrhea and syphilis, etc., or viral infection like warts and HIV/AIDS. These are the diseases which are sexually transmitted. Prevention of pregnancy are known as the contraception. Contraception means the pregnancy can be prevented by three main methods. They are barrier methods, chemical methods, and surgical methods. Barrier methods consist of using condoms, diaphragm, cervical caps, copper T, etc. Chemical method consists of taking drugs like oral pills, vaginal pills, etc. And surgical methods consist of removing or tying a small parts of the vas deferens in male is known as the vasectomy, or fallopian tube in female is known as the tubectomy. So this is the overall. Now again it is the flow chart of the method of contraception. The physical barrier to prevent union of sperm and egg, use of condom and diaphragm and cervical cap. Surgical method also called the sterilization in vasectomy, and the vas deferences of male is blocked to prevent sperm transfer. In tubectomy, the fallopian tube of female is blocked to prevent egg to reach uterus. Chemical method, oral contraceptives changes the hormonal balance to check the eggs release in females. OCs cause side effect. And IUCD, the intrauterine contraceptive devices, is known as copper T or loops, is the placed in the uterus to prevent pregnancy. So this chapter is complete. Thank you.